Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our January My Next Raise Partner webinar. My name is Lisa Friedlander. I am the CRO at Next.Law and My Next Raise, and we are really excited to bring you just a really interesting and important topic today on strategic foresight. You have an idea, you have a vision, your goal, but how do you get there? What do you do first? How do you come up with the strategy? There's a difference between sort of vision and tactics, and it's a real skill of the way of thinking that combines creativity and analysis. So we're really thrilled that you're here today and very grateful for Allyson Redpath, who is the founder of ForesightIQ. She developed her strategic foresight capabilities while creating strategic options for clients in investment banking. Her experience includes investment research at Goldman Sachs, investment banking at Schroders and Citigroup, treasury analysis at Credit Agricole, and debt securities at Merrill. She has been everywhere. She is also the founder of Citrine Angels, that I'm a proud member of, a group of women investors who invest in female-funded companies. We are in for a real treat with Allyson, and I'm so grateful for her to be here today. We will have plenty of time for questions towards the end of the presentation. Feel free to put them in the chat if you're afraid you're going to forget, or just hold on to them, and Allyson will address everything towards the end of the presentation. So with that being said, Allyson, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Terrific, Lisa. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an area that I'm very excited about and interested in, and love to talk about it. So I'm going to just explain before I launch into the actual presentation what we're going to be talking about. I want to talk about the thought process for strategic foresight. What is that? What does that mean? And who else is using strategic foresight? And then what is the actual process that you can go through? And most importantly, I think for a lot of people who are time stretched, as we all seem to be, talk about how you can use AI to do a lot of the heavy lifting, meaning like research the trends, figure out, what different pieces of the ecosystem are doing and how they might react to these trends, right? So that you can do a lot of the higher level thinking, right? So we're not outsourcing our strategic thinking to AI, we're using it as a tool so that we can do more of the value added work. Okay, and so with that, I will just go to share the deck and present. Okay, so here we are. And as I said, what is strategic foresight? Who uses it? Oh, and also I'm going to talk about mindset, meaning this, as Lisa mentioned, it's a combination of creativity and analysis. So you want to be doing expansive, broad thinking about the whole industry and the whole ecosystem, but at the same time, be able to be strategic and focused on the right information, right? So it's a couple of different things you need to be doing at the same time in terms of mindset. And then we're going to talk about how to use AI to identify trends and do stakeholder analysis, as well as visioning out to 5 to 10 years out about what might happen in your industry. And then talk about, in the end, what might you do about it? And actually do a demo. I'm going to share my ChatGPT screen where you can see, and I'm going to give you the prompts. So I'll send you the deck. I mean, literally, you can just cut and paste and use it for yourself. So what is strategic foresight anyway? It's the first piece of strategy. I think a lot of people that I talk to at least think, okay, I want to go accomplish this. I want to start this business. I want to achieve this. Okay, what do I do about it? Well, there's a missing piece between that, right? There's some thinking that you need to do. So there's a process that you can use to analyze the trends. And then once you get used to doing that, you train your brain and it becomes a skill so that you can just sort of like think about it. You don't need to go through I think it's a bit like dancing. First you learn the choreography, and then after you get used to it, you don't really need to think about it and you can just do it on your own, right? So who's using strategic foresight? Well, you may have heard about the conference in Davos held by the World Economic Forum. And they have several good articles on strategic foresight on their website. And one of them talks about, they did a survey, more than 90% of companies are using strategic foresight in their businesses. But what do you do if you don't have a big strategy department and you can't do that on your own, right? So similarly, there's a lot of universities that teach this, usually in their MBA programs. It's sometimes called future studies. And in fact, University of Houston, you can even get a master's degree. They have a whole program specifically on strategic foresight. And I got a certificate from the University of Houston in this. There's some specialty firms that do this. The leading one in the US is the Future Today Institute. It's headed by Amy Webb, who's written several good books on strategic foresight if you want to learn more. She's a professor at NYU, and you can see their clients are kind of, the who's who. This is a very short list of many more clients they have. And their European counterpart is the Future Laboratory, a specialist firm that has a lot of leading companies as their clients. There's also a couple of nonprofits who are doing some very good work in this field. One of them is in the US is Institute for the Future, which is very connected with out in Silicon Valley and is very intertwined with Silicon Valley, and they have courses in this. And their European counterpart would be the Copenhagen Institute, which has been around for many years and does a lot of good work and teaches class in this as well. So I just listed, Lisa said I've done lots of different things, and I know there's a lot of information on this page, but that's kind of the point. It's like I've had a lot of different jobs that are somehow related to this, because this strategic foresight incorporates a lot of different pieces of business: strategy, research, behavioral economics, psychology, visioning, design thinking, ecosystem analysis, and puts it all together. So, and what can you use it for? There's so many use cases for this. Generally, it helps you be prepared for the future, right? We're not predicting the future. Nobody can predict the future, but we can do what if. What is likely to happen? What is less likely to happen, but something that we need to think about, right? So it can help you make better decisions by keeping track of what's going on in the market. And, specifically if you're starting a new business or a line of business, it can be helpful for that, or also to pivot your business, right? Because I think a lot of people that I talk to, sometimes they feel stuck. They say, I'm doing this with my business and I think maybe I should pivot, but I'm not sure and I don't really know how to decide. This can help. Basically, because once you understand ecosystem dynamics, that helps you anticipate changes in the market, right? And which helps you be prepared for the future. So I think adaptability and resilience are so incredibly important in this market, and strategic foresight can help. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not just using it as we're going to look at a screen and absorb the information. We're reading it to try and create a mental map for ourselves about what's going on in our industry and our market, and use the AI as a tool. And we're using systems thinking. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at our whole ecosystem. And then we're literally, if you think about, you do projection models on spreadsheets, right, for your business. And you've got, what do I think is going to happen next year and the year after and the year after? We're going to use a similar thought process where we're going to be doing it with the entire ecosystem. Well, that's really hard to do with just in your head, right? So this is why AI is really such a great tool for this. And because all these pieces are interconnected, right? If the regulators do one thing, then the local communities might do something else, which means you need to do something else, right? And it's all interconnected. So one thing as you're thinking about this, and I know this is sometimes hard to do when you're an expert on your own business and on your own industry and topic, is you're like, oh, I know how this works. Well, this is one of the things I said, there's like a little bit of a dichotomy in the mindset that you need to use. It's like, yes, you need to be thinking critically and analytically and use the knowledge that you have. And at the same time, you want to be open-minded and have like this, like, let's pretend I don't know anything about my industry. What is this telling me, right? So it's an experiment, and you can run these different scenarios. That's the great thing about AI, right? You just give it a different assumption and go run it again. Which is why, we want to be, as I mentioned earlier, we want to be intentional about how we use our cognitive bandwidth. We're going to be letting the AI do the heavy lifting so that we can think broadly about what we might want to be, where we might want to be in the future, and not get bogged down in the detail. Because I know to run your business, you have to know all the details inside and out, right? But for this, we're not doing that. We're going to be just doing a more of a broad overview, right? Now, the actual process that we would use is, one, we're going to find these trends and signals meaning emerging indicators that might indicate a trend in the future, but we're not sure yet, but we want to keep an eye on them, right? And then I call it risk assessment, meaning, okay, great, we found all these different trends, but which ones are important to you and your business? Which ones are actual risks? Because you can't focus on everything and you can't run scenarios and everything. So you need to be prioritized, and that's what that is. Now, the stakeholder analysis, you probably do intuitively already, but this is giving you a more thorough and systematic approach to doing it, meaning you're going to look at each of the stakeholders in your industry and think about, what are their motivations? What do they want? What are they trying to avoid? Therefore, and you kind of like do that, like, okay, what is the government trying to do? What do my customers want? What do they not want, right? And you need to think about all of these things at the same time. And what is likely to visioning is taking these patterns and running them out towards the future, like what might happen going down the road. And once we've done that, we can start to think through what that might mean in a specific way for a business, right? And I'm going to do this demo based on just sort of a generic company, because, if you're doing this for your company, then you're going to need to upload specific information, right? Or, find it from a different source, because you don't want to rely on ChatGPT or Perplexity or whoever to know this information, right? So you want to be, in order to minimize hallucinations, you want to be very specific about the information that you're giving the AI and tell it what to rely on to be giving you the next answer, right? So once you've thought through what problems or opportunities might be resulting from these trends that you've identified, then you can think about what to do about it, right? So in terms of mindset, this is one of the dichotomies that I was referring to earlier. You want to be skeptical because you might get some hallucinations, and you also don't want to take everything at face value anyway, right? You want to think through, where did the information come from, and who was writing this information, and do they have any motivation behind it, and not just rely on the AI summaries. And at the same time, if there's something that seems a little wacky, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Psychedelics seemed pretty wacky probably 10 years ago, but now look at it, right? So the idea is to think about what could happen in a very broad sense. These are the areas that we're going to be looking at. And don't feel like you have to remember all these. First of all, I'm going to send you the deck. And second of all, we're going to be talking about these in more detail, right? But the idea is to give you a thorough scope of what the work is going to look like, right? And these are just things that are hopefully going to characterize and capture all of the different aspects of the trends that might affect. If you think about your businesses in the middle of all these things, right? Now, I've called out interest rates as a separate category, which is kind of unusual because most people include it under economy. But I think personally that it is such an important lever of everything else that happens, right? It affects all of these other categories in some way, right? And if you think about Silicon Valley Bank, right? Interest rates, boom, you never know, right? So that's something that's important to keep an eye on. And here are some examples of the kinds of things that you want to be thinking about and why each one of these is relevant. And I don't need to go through each one of these, but just to give some examples of how they could be relevant to your business. Now, let's talk about types of data sources. Now, this is just very general. You're not going to use all of these, but I just want to explain the different categories. Because, okay, on the left with the red star, we have primary data sources. And that's really, those are the actual facts, right? These are the numbers in the spreadsheet. These are the original scientific research, the surveys, focus groups, right? That's the actual information. Now, secondary information, research data, is an interpretation of that. So that has somewhat subjective, right? Now, economic indicators fall into this, and people say, well, isn't GDP? That's a fact, that's a number. Well, not really, exactly, because it's actually a collection of other data that someone is aggregating and interpreting, and there's seasonal adjustments, and then they go back and revise it, right? It's not an actual fact. And the further away you get from the red star, the less accurate it's going to be. And on the right is the tertiary, and that's the AI summaries. And that's what we're going to use as a tool, right, to sort of aggregate all this information. But keep in mind, it's still fairly far removed from the actual data. So if you find something in these AI summaries, you say, wow, that's really important for my business, find the source, go read the source, right? So that's just to give you a context for what kinds of things we're going to be looking at. And here's something else that we're not going to be using today, but I wanted to bring it up because I think it's really important, that you want to look at a variety of different sources based on their subjective perspectives, right? And I think it's very easy and intuitive to read the article, read the publications that fall in line with where you are personally. But at the same time, the world doesn't work that way. And if you're only looking at one part of one column or two columns of this, then think about all the information that you're missing about what's going on in the world. So it's important to have a broad view. And, along those lines, we want to talk about, there's not one right answer to this, right? There's a variety of different things that might happen that we want to be thinking about. And the other thing is, when we're looking at trends and we're looking at each, that wheel that I showed you, we're going to be looking at trends in each one of those individual categories. And the idea is that if your business is going to want to find these waves, these trends, think of them as powerful waves going off into the future. And your business, you want to ride these waves into unicorn land, right? And the thing is, if you can find several waves or trends that are sort of headed in the same direction, wow, that's powerful, right? And those are the mega trends. That's what we want to keep an eye out for, to see if we can find trends that are in multiple of these categories, because that's really going to give us even better information. So what are we actually looking for, right? So as I was talking about signals versus trends, weak signals might be something you might find in just general, when I say chatter, I mean just social media, articles, social kinds of websites that aren't necessarily facts yet, right? As I said, psychedelics 10 years ago might be a good example of that. Now, as it gets to be a little bit stronger, you might see it in some industry publications like, this is kind of an emerging trend. Is this something that's going to become important? We don't know yet, maybe, right? And then it starts to make its way into trend reports. Now, of course, I know when you're looking at trends for customers, there's early adopter, et cetera, there's a lot more categories of trends, right? But for our purposes here, we don't need that level of detail. So we're not worried about that. Now, when it gets to be a stronger trend, you might see it in mainstream publications, CNN, right? Those are more obvious trends. And then they tail off eventually. So what we're going to do once we find these trends is we're going to say, how relevant are they and how much impact they would have? And I actually want to, when you talk about impact, I put it into two different categories. One is how pervasive it would be. Like, does it affect every aspect of your business? Does it affect every single one of your stakeholders? and then serious, and then how serious would it be? Like, what's the magnitude of the impact, right? So there's two different pieces of that you want to be thinking about. And then we want to look at the time horizon. So I'm categorizing these in time horizons. These are big buckets, right? 2 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And I think doing this, and those are intentionally big buckets, because I think for this type of work, doing it 1 year at a time gives it the implication that it's more specific, that it's able to be more specific than is really true. And what we're really, really interested in, what I'm really, really interested in, is more like the 5 to 10 year. And we're really using the earlier ones to get to those building blocks, right? Because that's where you're going to find information that you may not be obvious right away. And I really like the analogy of watching potential hurricanes develop. If you see this map and you see the swirl in the map, and it's kind of like, okay, we think there's something forming out here, but we're not sure yet. And maybe it's just going to blow out to sea and be nothing, right? But maybe it's going to be closer, and maybe it's going to be stronger. And so that's the kind of mindset that we want to have with this kind of work. And you don't need to remember all this, but these are actually the prompts that you would use to give to, I'm using ChatGPT. This, you can use any platform, and it's just going to depend. A few months from now, there might be a better way to do it, right? So you want to be flexible about which platform you're using. But we're just going to ask for what are the trends in each of those categories. Those are the categories that you saw on the wheel. Rate the relevance, which is what we talked about, and estimate the time horizon, and ask if there's any mega trends. Right? We get. And then we're going to do the same. This is exactly the same thing with signals. Although we need to define signals here because it's not necessarily going to know what a signal is, right? So we need to explain what that is. And what I find interesting is you really do get different information if you ask for trends versus you ask for signals or emerging trends. You actually get you do get different answers. And then, oops, I went back. And then we're going to do the stakeholder assessment that I talked about. Now, I think we all know why we're going to look at stakeholders, because they're going to affect your business, right? And there's a pretty broad categories of stakeholders. And for this demo, I'm doing it just as broad categories of communities, for example. But I think when you're doing it, you can actually, you can ask for specific organizations, right? Or specific types of stakeholders that are particularly relevant for your business. And these are the prompts that you would use. Just list all the stakeholder groups relevant to the industry. And I am giving it a little detail underneath: aggregate similar organizations into groups, include some examples so I know what you're talking about, right? And then list the primary wants and needs, and also the things that they want to avoid. And that's going to give you some indication about what the motivations are. And when you're looking at these, we're going to look at the actual output for this too. When you look at this, you want everything. You want to do a reality check. Like, does this make sense? Is this working? And then we can do visioning. And we can say, what if these trends happen that you just gave me, AI, and what do we think that the stakeholder groups would do as a result of these trends? Because we know what the stakeholder groups want and what they don't want, right? So therefore, what does that mean for my business or companies in the industry, right? And I would just note that I would wait till later in the process to start talking about a specific company. I think you get a better result if you do like the overall systems analysis first, and then you say, where does my company fit into this, right? So it should not be it shouldn't be company centric. It should be holistic. Then we can take this further out. We're going to go 3 to 5 years. And again, we're doing this projection model with rolling the stakeholder analysis forward, right? So if the trends that we previously identified for the first 2 years happen, and then we're adding, this is different, we're adding the signals become trends, and the stakeholders do what you just said that they were probably going to do, then what happens? What happens next? And then what does that mean for companies? And we can do the exact same thing for 5 to 10 years. And thereby we're doing a visioning, we're using AI to help us with visioning. So once we do that, we can talk about what does that mean for a business in this industry? What are potential problems? Like we've just talked about with the AI has just given us the trends and what we think is the stakeholders, how they would react to those trends. So what problems could that mean for my business or for a company in that industry? And what are potential opportunities? And then we take it forward and then we say, well, what would we do about that? And we're looking for ideas here. We're not looking for an answer. We're looking for what might I want to do about that? And I think also very importantly, what are the costs or resources required to do that? Like how hard is this to do these actions that you're suggesting? And what are the potential benefits? And I'm just asked the AI to categorize them very generally, high, medium, low. And then you can do more specific drill down thinking if you want, but this is just a broad categories, right? And then I do that separate. We want to do that separately to address the problems and then specifically for the opportunities and rate. And you get similar answers, but slightly different when you do that. Now, this is also fun. I think you will enjoy this part. And I say, how would your answer to the previous 2 questions about problems and opportunities be different if we hadn't looked at trends or stakeholders, right? Because I think sometimes people like to just jump to let's find out what the answer is, but you'll see that what the AI generally says is that they would give much more general answers. It wouldn't take a lot of things into consideration that we need to. Okay, so once you have all these actions, a lot of times people ask me when I'm doing talks or something, and they say, I have all these different ideas and I'm not sure how to prioritize them. How do I do that? This is a really simple model that I like as a starting point, right? Just to put things in buckets. Like it's very intuitive. Okay, if it has high impact and low cost, okay, go just do those all day, right? If it's low impact and high cost, okay, let's just forget about those. Now, the other 2 categories, if it's high impact and high cost, let's think about that a little bit more, right? Maybe there's a way to still have most of the impact, but cut the costs a lot, right? And similarly, if it's low impact and low cost, is there a way we can keep the cost down, but still and boost the impact, right? So that gives you at least a starting point. So when Lisa mentioned at the beginning, we're going from idea to action, you can see now, oh, okay, I have this idea, I want to go into this industry. Boom, all of a sudden, now you have this matrix and this list of actions that you can actually do, things that you can go out and do. Now, this is sort of like a next step if you want to do it for like competitive analysis would be stage 2 of this, which I'm not going to demo, but because it's very industry specific. But this is a list of the information that I think that you would want to upload or input for a company in order to be able to have the AI give you a good answer. And unfortunately, most of the the LLMs can't do this very well right now. So you need to get that from a different source and input it or upload it somehow. Now you could do this for your company, or you could do this for for competitors too. So, and then that's the next thing I'm going to be working on, which is like a competitive strategy model for this. But basically, business description, financial data, and there's a couple things that are a little different here. I put like the board members. how many years have been the board, along with any personal relationships or and I do like to get into a little bit of the people side of this, because it's actually the people who are making this decision, right? It's not, you think about your competitors as like these companies and their blobs on your chart, right? But there's actually people making those decisions, and they have their own subjective bias. Like, if you think about, that's why I say at the bottom, summary of their historical growth strategy, and you will know a lot of these things if you're in the business, right? How have they generally grown, right? Are they doing it through acquisitions or new products? Are they very aggressive? Are they very conservative? All of that matters. And so that's the kind of thing that you're going to want to input. Okay, now before we get to questions, I'm going to, as promised, going to go over to my Chat GPT screen and share that, because oh, and I chose for this example to do the property casualty insurance industry, because given everything that's happening in the world now, that just seemed like it was just something I was thinking about, like, God, what do you do if you're in that business, right? And so this is literally what I showed you on the deck. And, and here's what the answer was. I have displayed the image. Okay. And this is what it gives me. And I asked for a 1-sentence explanation. I think if you're, just for the purposes of this demo, but I think if you're doing it, I would want a more detailed explanation, like paragraphs actually, and more detail on sources. I just did basic sources so you can see that it's something, okay, US Census Bureau, National Institute on Aging. Okay, those are reputable sources, right? As just sort of a check. But the way that I set it up here, there's no way for me to go back and figure out exactly where it came from, right? But you would want to be able to do that. So you're going to want to pull out a little more data here. So, and I don't want to make everybody like really dizzy by going through this really fast, but I'm telling you this, there's like, there's a lot. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this without making everybody really dizzy. So this is the economy, and would you like me to proceed? Yes. Government regulation, increased regulation of insurance pricing. Yeah, probably. And you want to do a reality check, right? Okay, yeah, climate change. Interesting. Increasing regulations on environmental sustainability. Okay. National Flood Insurance Program reform. Yeah, I totally see that coming, right? Culture Society, and it goes through each of the, and I mean, it's using good sources. If you think about this, Brookings, Harvard Law Review, right? These are reputable sources that it's pulling from. And I didn't ask it to use any specific sources, although you could do that if you have access, as long as it has access, right? Interest rates, global interest rate divergence. Interesting. Okay. And it goes through the rest of the categories. So look at this. Okay. And I have to do all of it because we don't want to skip. All right. So then the next thing, are there any mega trends, which is the similar same trends in environmental and climate change awareness? Yeah. Digitization. Yeah. Right. Globalization. Yeah. So those are all interesting. Now, the next thing I said, I did the exact same thing for signals, right? And as I said, we're actually going to end up with different answers. Increasing number of single person households. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that actually, but it makes sense. Growing trend of multi-generational living. Yeah. Right. So you actually do get value added from doing it this way too. And wealth distribution, crypto, right? And a lot of these things are obvious when you look at them, but unless you specifically ask the AI to pull them out and rely on them, it might not do that, right? So you need to, it's more about giving the AI the right things to think about. And also, you see how much is here. It's incredible that you can do this, and you can do this really fast. You can just cut and paste, right? The exact same things. for your industry. And, I want to mention also, as I'm just scrolling through this before everybody gets too dizzy, and we go into the stakeholders, I'd be happy to meet with any of you if you want to talk about one-on-one, if you want to talk about how you would apply this to your specific industry or your particular use case. So now we're going to ask it about the stakeholder groups, right? And here we go, examples of organizations. Starting with local communities. What do they want? Tax revenue, public safety, infrastructure development to reduce long-term risks, right? What do they want to avoid? Property damage, overcrowding without proper regulation. And then regulators, it gives you the examples, right? What they want, what they don't want. Policyholders, and it goes through competitors. And we're not going to focus on competitors here, but because that's I feel like that's a whole separate analysis, because you need to think about the specific companies and the specific motivations in the same way that you would be doing a stakeholder analysis. You use that same methodology for competitors. You just need to make sure the right information is available to the AI in order to do that properly. Okay, and then banks. In your case, you might have investors, right? Management. And it gave me just 8, right? When it first started, and it said, do you want more? And yes, you really want like 15 to 20, I think. Because see, look, if we didn't ask for more, we wouldn't have included reinsurers, which are huge, right? Fintech companies, consumer groups. So you want to make sure you have a full, broad stakeholder analysis. And in this case, we got 16. Okay. He said covers the breadth. That's about right. 15 to 20. Okay. So now we're going to say, but this is the visioning piece. If the trends previously identified come to pass, like we just saw them, what is the likely reaction of each of the stakeholder groups in the next 2 years? We're just doing the 2 years. And what is the likely impact on the companies, right? Okay, I will now do this. Local communities, likely reaction, likely advocate for stronger regulations. Yes. Better insurance coverage. Yeah. Impact on companies. Regulatory changes, stricter underwriting standards. Yep. Regulators, what are they likely to do? More stringent regulations. Yep. Increased scrutiny on insurers' financial health. Yeah. Like all of these make sense, right? So, and the reality, when you do the reality check, it checks out. And you can do more detail on this, but I feel like this gives you, I mean, already you're going to have lots and lots of things to think about when you do this for your own. And we'll go through, it goes through each of the 16. Whoops, I only did 14. Well, I'll have to think about that. And then we're going to do the same thing, only we're going to do it for the 3 to 5 year time horizon, right? We just did it for 2025 to 2026, but now we're going to do for 2027 to 2029. And what is that going to mean, right? Local communities in the future. Insurance companies will need to invest in more sophisticated climate risk models, definitely. Increased burden of claims, yes. What are the regulators going to do? Probably going to have, the companies are going to have higher compliance costs, right? Something that you're going to need to think about. Now, this is a tough business to be in. So I don't know if this is, hopefully we're going to see, we are going to be talking about problems and opportunities next, but this is to give you a sense of how, and I'm just going to scroll through this real quick. And then we're going to do the same thing for 2030 to 2035. Like literally this is the exact same thing. And it also incorporates the signals that we saw, right? Both trends and signals. It said, what's going to happen then, right? Insurers increasingly incorporate community-based risk assessments and participate in local disaster recovery programs and contribute to infrastructure development. Yep. So I know this is a lot, but that's kind of the point. Can you imagine if you had to do all this thinking all by yourself without AI? It's a lot. So then we're going to say, based on the previously identified trends and signals and likely stakeholder responses, basically all the things that it just told us, just use that information, right? What are 10 to 15? I just picked 10 to 15. I think that's a good number because once you start to get more than that, then it gets unwieldy. Problems companies should be prepared to address, and also what are potential business opportunities. Here we go. Pricing pressures, cybersecurity threats, supply chain, just like these are all the things that the problems, right? We're just asking about the problems now. We're not asking yet for what the answers are, right? And now here are the business opportunities, some business opportunities, right? Sustainable insurance product, eco-friendly climate, okay. Cyber insurance, sure, that makes sense. Internet of Things integration, absolutely. Partnering with insurtech companies, yeah, I guess we don't have any insurtech startups on the line here, but think that would be an interesting opportunity for them. And micro insurance, you know, particularly in emerging markets. Blockchain, expanding into emerging markets where insurance penetration is low but growing. And that, like each of these, you can ask for more detail, right? You could ask and say which parts of Asia, Africa, or Latin America would be the best opportunities, right? This is just the first stage. Now, okay, it's a quarter of, so I want to leave time for questions, but we're almost done with this. So this, you know, what are specific actions, right? Because we didn't ask for specific actions before. We were just saying, what are the general problems, right? And digital transformation strategies. Let's see if we can find one. Look, cybersecurity measures, sure. Partner with insurtech startups, yeah. Cost resources, medium, benefit return, high. Innovative technology, yep. Internet of Things, I love that for personalized policies too. Flexible payment and processing options. Invest in reinsurance, yeah, like Lloyd's of London kinds of things. Here we have a global expansion again. Gig economy, and here's like a specific thing. Develop insurance products for the gig economy. I don't know that there's that many of those right now. Seems like there should be more, right? So here's, okay, and here's even more. It gave us full 20, right? Now here's, I even did more, right? Specific opportunities. All right, so I think you get the point here. There's just like a ton of information that you can get for this. Oh, I wanted to skip down to the part where I asked, how would your insurance, how would your answer to the previous two questions, which is, what are the problems and opportunities and actions, right? Be different if they were the first questions without looking at the trends or stakeholders, right? Okay. Without, they would be more generalized. It's, the answers would be more generalized and wouldn't take the more specific things into account. And in general, it says without considering the trends and stakeholder context, the responses would be more focused on immediate operational and financial challenges. That's tactics. We're not doing like we're literally not trying to do tactics here, right? Along with the immediate business opportunities, the strategies would be less forward thinking and more oriented towards just a stable situation, which of course we know never ever happens. So that's why you can add a lot of value by doing it, looking at the trends and looking at the stakeholder analysis before you start thinking about any of the problems or the opportunities or the actions. Okay.
Wow.
I know that was a lot of information.
Wow. My head is, I mean, but it's remarkable. It's actually truly remarkable, Allyson. I'm like, my mind is blown. Maren has a question here. Have you asked the AI, either in your example that you gave us, and Charm, maybe in other things, to grade and evaluate its answers to your prompts?
I haven't, but that's a good idea. Like what is your confidence level in this particular answer? I think there's a lot more you can do with this. I wanted to give you a basic framework that you can use to start And I would highly recommend that you do those kinds of, if you think about other things that you want to pursue, if you want a longer answer, you want it to focus on different things. The other thing that I think is very interesting uses for this is, like, we just saw all these trends, right? Well, what if you want to run different scenarios? What if you want to, you use your subjective expertise like that you have in this industry, and you say, okay, we saw these 20 trends, but okay, let's say I want to only look at numbers 2, 7, and 8, 20, and say, what if these 3 things happen, but the other things don't happen? Then what does that mean for my business? I mean, and there's so many different combinations you can do for that. But once you have everything laid out, then you have a framework that you can use to tailor it specifically to what you want to look at.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how you mentioned, you can't always tell the reliability, and so you can ask it, if you answered this, what are the main weaknesses in your response? Where is it least credible? Those kinds of things, and it'll create its own homework.
Yes, that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Lindsay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. I have just one question, and it relates to something you were saying in the beginning in the setup about chatter versus trends. And I think it's great that a lot of the sources that it pulled from were well-established sources. And sometimes I have trouble with that. It'll pull from, it's not pulling from things that make sense. But I was wondering, have you played around with sources, and are there benefits to sources that have more signals of chatter versus like the mainstream like types of things? Yeah, I couldn't
Yes.
get a sense for that. Like, because before I thought you were saying maybe you look out for chatter and there might be things in the chatter that haven't made it to the mainstream yet. But maybe actually you want to kind of ignore that and just stick with the main stuff, from Pew and Brookings and all.
Okay, yeah. There's both things are valid, right? There's different ways to look at it. And I have played around with trying to give it specific sources to look at and others not to look at, but I haven't found, see, the issue that I am running into with the things that I want to do is that a lot of the sources that I really want to use are behind subscription paywalls, right? And so I'm still trying to figure out how to integrate those. And I think that there is definite value. I mean, you could ask it, only use Reddit and tell me what you come up with, right? I mean, that would be kind of interesting, actually. It would give you, and I think both approaches are valid. It just gives you different answers. It gives you different things to think about.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other question? Feel free to chime in, or a small group.
Hi, this is Purva.
Hi.
No, thank you. That was a fantastic layout. What I really liked was a very good framework, and it can be applied to any and all industries. That is pretty good application of a framework. I come from a biohealth, health tech industry, and my question is again not industry, is again industry agnostic. What I meant to say is like, so Allyson, is it possible, like, have you done validation of the answers that have been received to see how it works for your strategy? Because strategy is such a big piece, and we talk about like 5 years and 10 years, it could really have big impacts for some major decision making. So would be curious to see how to like do some smaller or larger validations or test it out to see. And because I could use it to uh, present it to some big stakeholders. But before that, I really want to make sure I have a good, and of course, running it through your own sources is good, but I'll be curious. Have you ever tried looking at some validation of the strategy?
I haven't implemented this as a company yet, if that's what you mean. Like there's no scientific method really, because this is all just being developed now. Like 6 months ago, I don't think you could have done this with AI, right? Like things are really developing very quickly. And I think 6 months from now, you're going to be able to do a lot more even. So it hasn't been around long enough to really be able to say, okay, I came up with this idea for this strategy and implemented it in, 5 years ago, and this is what happened, right? Because it just hasn't been around long enough. But I think that the idea is not to come up with an answer that is the right answer that will give you, it's not like that. It's more, you as the CEO and the chief strategist for your business, boom, you just have you just have a whole research department that has just given you a bunch of work and given you a lot of things to think about. And you can have them drill down on this more, right? You can go back and ask follow-up questions, and you can have it do more work. And just think of it as your own personal strategy department or your own research department.
Oh, no, absolutely. And this is such a new thing as so AI, it is so evolving and it continues to evolve as we are talking. I mean, people are using it in so many ways and so much information is being dumped from different parts of the world. But no, a very good framework, and I look forward to receiving your content. So I'm planning to do some of my own strategy sessions using it. And thank you so much.
Great. I would love to hear how that works out for you, really.
I will. I'll reach out to you. Like, I do have some partnering ideas because somebody has been developing an AI tool, and I can just run it through you or like chat with like Lisa, whatever.
Yeah. And one other thing that I did want to mention also is you just talked about partnering. I'm talking to some strategy and change management consulting firms about going to do this work for their clients, to help their clients do some of their own thinking and set up their own models. So if you all know of firms that would be good for me to talk to, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. I think at least I know one of them. I'll reach out to you and we can chat.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
Sure.
Great. And feel free to put your emails. Obviously I will include Allyson on the email to everybody, but if you would like to give Allyson your email, feel free to include it in the chat. Any last questions? We have just a few more minutes before we wrap up. I, for one, am looking forward to going back and looking at the deck and listening in again. It's just so fascinating and so helpful. Any final questions?
Great
Well,
session.
Allyson,
Thank you.
go ahead, Maren, go ahead.
Had a great session. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks,
I'm
Maren.
glad everybody could be here. Allyson, thank you so much. This is just really exciting and valuable and potentially just a complete game changer. So I, for one, am interested in digging in and learning how I can apply it to what we're doing here at Next and My Next Raise. So stay tuned for an email from me with Allyson will send me the deck. We'll forward the deck to you all with the recording for today. Last opportunity to sign up for the beta platform of My Next Raise. If you haven't done so already, please check it out. And we look forward to seeing you at other future events. We have investor office hours, Pitchmaster prep shops, more of these great partner webinars on a variety of different topics, founders Q&A sessions, lots of content at your disposal to help de-risk your company and get it to the next level. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and week. If you're in the DMV, stay warm. And Allyson, truly, truly grateful for your time and expertise today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Lisa. I was happy to be here. Thanks. Nice meeting you all.
Thanks, everybody.